Welcome back to the Public Relations Podcast. I'm going to talk about the relationship between PR people and journalists today. And the reason is because I've had a bunch of conversations recently about particularly the dynamics of how it works in Hollywood. And one of the people that gave me a lot of really, really interesting insights did it on the basis of being off the record. So I'm not going to share who they are or any details about them because they know some of the people are involved in what's going on with the whole Blake Lively stuff and all those controversies at the moment and some of the people involved in the sort of PR scene in Hollywood. So what I thought I would do, because I'm always keen on trying to provide some sort of valuable insight into what goes on, what the relationships actually are compared to what you tend to see in the textbooks, I thought I would sort of summarize some of the key points of that. So I'll do that in just a second. I would just say, first of all, thank you so much if you've been helping me out this week and the last week in discussing what the future of the Public Relations Podcast should be. I think one of the best analogies was actually put forward by someone else who said that the show has kind of, it's a bit like a relationship. It's been an enormous amount of fun for 5 years. And you come to a point where you've got to say, well, how seriously do you take this now? Do you take it seriously? Do you get in quotes, married? Or do you move on? And I don't want to move on. I don't want to go somewhere else. I want to carry on with the project in some way. So I've got a lot of ideas. And what I'm hoping is that particularly if you are a PR agency, or whether you're in a big agency or if it's just you on your own, you're some kind of consultant, I'm hoping that this is going to massively increase the value of what I do in that respect. But anyway, I'm having those conversations. If you want to reach out to me with ideas on what you think I should be doing with the podcast and how it would help you, then do let me know. Because ultimately, whatever happens, even though obviously I need to find a way to sustain it to make this podcast work, I want to make something that will actually genuinely help you. Anyway, let's talk about journalists and let's talk about the relationship with PR people. And as I say, the thing is that this relationship, of course, is often a bit of a tightrope. And I know because I've been on the PR side and I've been on the journalist side. So I know what it's like to be on both sides of this. You are balancing cooperation and collaboration with caution. You're balancing values with integrity. And as I say, recently I've been having some conversations, which initially was sparked off by talking about the Blake Lively case and this whole, this sort of suing and counter-suing. I'm sure I don't need to go into all the details of it, but basically these Hollywood people are fighting each other in the courts and claiming various things against each other. We know that there's so many campaigns going on all the time which are trying to discredit people. And this isn't just in Hollywood. This is, in business, in everywhere in the world. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. And so I was starting to dig into this and sort of say, well, look, how does Hollywood work differently? And how does it work in that sort of more aggressive side of reputation management where you're not trying to boost someone's reputation, but trying to undermine it? So as I say, I started speaking to a few people about this to kind of find out how this happens, to see if we can get some value from it. And one of the first things to say, I suppose, is that the journalist relationship is always going to be delicate. On one side, PR professionals are tasked with protecting their clients' reputations, while, of course, pushing their stories to the forefront. And on the other side, you've got journalists who are, in many cases, still feel that sense of duty to uncover the truth and report the truth, even in the celeb world where so much is fiction and it's about clickbait. Even if that sort of conflicts with the PR person's narrative, that's not who they're being paid for. They're not being paid by the PR person. They're not being paid by the agency. They're being paid by their listeners who want gossip and stuff like that. And as I say, the Blake Lively case kind of just brings this to light. You've got the PR people who are trying to put across the arguments of their clients, trying to put their side of the argument and trying to win the public support from that. And then you've got the journalists who are going, okay, well, there's a juicy story in here. Do we really need to listen to what these people are telling us? Or can we start to uncover what the PR is doing, what they're trying to do to manipulate the message? Because, is there a stronger story in there? So you've got the case of in quotes, and I emphasize in quotes because I think PR people are there to represent their clients. It's not what the PR person is doing. They're there to put the best argument for the client. But on the flip side, then also I've had people who've said, well, look, it's journalists who are misusing their power. PR people are just doing a job. And, journalists can sometimes just massage the message just as much as PR people was the argument that was put across. So whatever you think about this, and I think there's so many different cases where you can argue both sides, there's no question that there is a tension at play. So what can you learn from this? I think one of the most compelling points that came across from some of the conversations I had was an anecdote about a legendary Hollywood entertainment PR person. And she was deeply respected by both journalists and publicists. So the publicists would put forward all this exclusive information. She would make sure that the journalists that were running good stuff would get the really, really good stuff. But she would also help out if she could, if there was a story that there was just no way of avoiding that would perhaps be critical. Her relationships weren't so much transactional. They were built on this sort of mutual respect and this kind of organic friendship. It was the journalist needed the content and the PR person needed the journalist to put the stories out there. So this was a kind of very nice relationship. It worked well. And the person I was speaking to was saying that this person was really, really respected as a PR person because they really helped out the journalist to do their job. And so inevitably, that person was going to be treated well. But this does bring us to this critical takeaway here. And as I say, there's going to be examples on the other side that I'll talk about in a moment. But it brings us this critical takeaway here, that it's the value and the trust are the currency of the PR journalist relationship. One person that I was talking to said that the problem then comes when this value exchange becomes imbalanced or is missing altogether, because then the relationship can easily drop into distrust or hostility, as perhaps we've seen in this Blake Lively case. As I say, I wanted to focus on the Hollywood side of things here today, because Hollywood, as I've talked about before, I think magnifies PR and it magnifies the techniques and the issues. And it adds a whole extra layer of complexity, because as one of the people I was speaking to said, celebrity PRs often struggle with the sheer volume of leaks and the sort of rivalries going on within industries. You've got stars that are trying to undermine other stars, and you've got PR people who are trying to undermine other PR people and their narrative. And the sheer amount of this means that it's harder for one particular celebrity PR to stand out and to provide that value to journalists, because a journalist has got a lot of options as to other people they can go to get some other salacious story. So this intense competition sometimes pushes some of these people, and the ones that often stand out for a while, to use overly aggressive tactics, which at the end of the day, it works well. Often these people gain a real notoriety. Celebrities sort of join with them because they have so much pressure. But then something goes wrong, something changes, or maybe the celebrities get tired of them or move on, or or new celebrities, new PRs come in that people go up for. And then that person loses that value to the journalist. And then the PR person becomes fair game, particularly if that person has used overly aggressive tactics. Outside of Hollywood, you can see this. I mean, I always think of the example of Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's former PR person when he was the UK Prime Minister. Now, this was from a different era. This is the pre-social media era. But he was a real master at using the carrot and stick. He could be incredibly charming and provide stories to people and give them exclusives. But at the same time, he would make it absolutely clear if he didn't like what a journalist was doing and was putting across the wrong message. And he would holler and I mean, you just have to read his various accounts of what it was like working with him. But the thing was that when he lost his value, when he was no longer directly in the middle of the government, when he was no longer able to really commentate with authority because he was no longer in there, the press turned on him, and it required quite a bit of rebranding on him to try and recover. Now, there's two elements to this. Number one is, worrying about your own professional future and how how aggressive you become. And number two is the whole change of the dynamic in that relationship, how he lost his value to journalists over that time, but how when he was at his prime, he was unbelievably valuable to them. So they would do generally what he would try to put across because they needed those stories from him. And particularly today, when journalists have so little resources and so little time, it's more and more important than ever for them to have a good relationship with PR people who can get them genuine, authentic information. And that doesn't mean putting across the classic, I know I talked about this a lot. It doesn't mean putting across your product announcement from your company. It means giving them valuable, genuinely useful stories and being a real resource to them, an information source, a contact to those, literally like that. So what actually is the relationship here? How should PR professionals take their relationships with journalists? I think the key lies in probably three principles to me, and this is the basis of what the discussions ended up with, is that number one, the best relationships, and this is what a Hollywood insider said to me, was that the best relationships are ones that are built on honesty. If a story needs to run because everyone else is running it, then a PR person has got to understand that there's no point being aggressive to try and kill it in one outlet if it's going to run everywhere else, because you're just going to upset that journalist. On the other hand, journalists have also got to have a degree of honesty as well. Is that if they're trying to twist the truth about a client beyond what is reality, then as one particular person told me in these conversations, is it's time to go back at these people and call them out for it and to hold them to account for it as well and to point out how they're wrong and use the same tactics that they were saying, use the same tactics on them as PR people are, in the sort of Blake Lively case, supposedly using the other way. So there is that need for that transparency. Both sides have got to understand what their goals are and be honest about it and understand that sometimes both sides are going to be upset. The next one, though, was about having a relationship which wasn't just about being nice, though. A temptation often PR people is just to be as nice as possible to journalists. But what the conclusion was from my conversations was that, no, that's not the answer. It's being respected because you have value, which is what matters. So it doesn't mean being aggressive. It doesn't mean being nasty. It doesn't mean being unnice. But what it means is don't just try to flatter someone purely in the hope that that will give you value. A journalist who will think twice about burning a bridge with a PR person who consistently delivers valuable content and vice versa. You're not going to call out as a PR person. You're not going to call out a journalist if they're being helpful to you. So it's not about being nice. It's about providing value, about actually being genuinely valuable to that other person. And the third thing, I think, was to know your limits. I think it is tempting for clients and for bosses to say, I want that story killed. And sometimes it cannot be done. If a story is gaining momentum and everyone else is reporting it, you are not going to be able to kill that story without some significant effort. As I say, there's no point just laying into one particular outlet to kill it if it's going on everywhere else. You're going to have to start generating a new narrative if you want to try and do it. So it's about knowing the limits of what you can achieve within the PR that you're doing. It may well mean, instead of trying to stop someone from running something, it means developing a new narrative that changes the whole perspective. Rather than going in there and hollering at a journalist and saying, you're completely unacceptable, you're lying and all this kind of thing, when they've got plenty of evidence to show otherwise. It's about generating a new narrative that they know that their audience are going to be interested in, that you can then put across, put all the facts, put all the evidence, generate a whole new story that they're going to start covering to kind of bring things back onto your way. So the point is that the relationship doesn't really need to be hostile, but it isn't a purely nice collaborative thing either. It's a dance, sometimes stepping forward, sometimes retreating, but always keeping the rhythm of that mutual benefit in mind. What is your value? What is their value? And why? And where is that relationship at the moment? Are you more valuable to them or less valuable to them, and vice versa? In the end, the PR journalist relationship is going to be like any other partnership. It thrives on that mutual respect, clear boundaries, and that sort of shared understanding of each other's goals. And as PR pros, the job is obviously to represent your clients while building those bridges with the media, not burning them. And as a journalist, the goal should be to pursue the truth while recognizing the value that PRs bring to the table in terms of delivering stories that your readers or listeners or whatever are going to appreciate and value and click on and spend money on and buy your publication or whatever it is. So then I just thought it would be interesting to kind of raise some of these points that have been going on in this discussion. I would love to be naming a lot more of these people, but sometimes, in fact, I would say, actually, this is a good point. Sometimes I'd say about 50% of the conversations I have are strictly off the record. And I just think sometimes some of these have really good nuggets in them, really useful information that could be helpful to people. And so I want to make sure that I am sharing those with you. Right, I will have a bit later in the week a comms conundrum for you. And then, what do we got? We'll have, also, don't forget, Lynn Queck. She is a fantastic in-house PR person that spoke to me the other day. And we were talking about what 2025 might mean for in-house comms pros. And so I've got that for you a little bit later in the week. Then I've got something the week after, and then I'm actually on holiday for 2 weeks. But I've got some more details for you ahead of then. Just finally, once again, if you've got thoughts on how this podcast and project, and I mean really blue sky thinking here, I know that's a buzzword, but really blue sky thinking here, how you think this could be changed to give more value to you. And I don't just mean content. One of the problems with content today is you can get it almost anywhere. I mean, how could fundamentally this project change to be valuable to you, your business, or your work? Let me know. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm under Richard Midson, Midson. That's Midson. I will speak to you later in the week.